When it comes to the year of 2077, Night City is one extremely active city. It has a wide variety of gangs roaming the streets committing horrific crimes and acts of terror. A new mayor seat is up for grabs due to the previous one dying due to suspicious circumstances, and the emperor of the megacorporation of Arasaka would be brutally murdered in the corporation's hotel, triggering a series of events and a city-wide manhunt for the person who did it. To say it was a unique year would be an understatement. That said, this whole city has seen its fair share of carnage ever since its conception in 1994. However, after a large campaign between the NUSA's FIA and the residents of Dogtown hunting down their infamous netrunner known as Songbird, the extremely experienced merc known as V would make a name for themselves after helping the president of the new United States of America, saving them and everything they stood for. In return for this, Myers' government offered to save V from the relics slowly killing them and escorted them to the best NUSA clinic they had in Langley, essentially giving them their life back. However, coming out of a 2-year coma, V would go on to witness the new changes that had happened to the world and Night City and how it affected the people of 2079. So what's changed in 2 years? How did the events of 2077 influence the direction of this city, and what happened to its people out there in the rest of the world? Well, in today's episode, we will try and piece together all of the little bits of information about what is actually going on in Night City, trying to work out how it got into the state it has and what that might mean going forward. And before I begin, I will say that some is based on my gameplay choices in the main campaign, but overall the end result will be the same for Night City in 2079, just some smaller details may be different to your playthrough. But with that said, this is an insight into the world of Cyberpunk 2 years into the future. This is Night City in the year of 2079. Understand how the world got into the state it has within 2079, we have to first look at the major event that triggered all of this, that being the overthrow of Saburo as the emperor and CEO of Arasaka. Despite everything that happened within that year, everything always goes back to this specific moment when Saburo's own son Yorinobu strangled his father. For years, the Arasaka corporation was thriving to be the biggest thing on the planet. Saburo made it his life goal to make them the most powerful military in the world, still bitter at the fact that not only was he discharged from the Japanese Imperial Army during World War II due to major injuries, but also due to the fact that Japan surrendered the way it did. In his eyes, it was utter humiliation on the world stage. From that point on, after his father's death, allowing him to inherit the corporation for himself, he would go on a massive campaign to make it that superpower that we know it is today in 2077. Yorinobu looked at how much he dedicated his time to the corporation and how much he groomed his firstborn Kei, himself and Hanako into being the next line of CEOs of this corporation, making sure they did everything he wanted them to do. Yorinobu was so angered by this that he made it his goal to tear down everything his father built with Arasaka, and sort of like Johnny Silverhand, wanted to make sure everything Saburo did was destroyed once and for all. He would even team up with a group of Japanese nomads on his mission to rid his father of the head of the corporation, and this event would be the one that led them to meet within Konbeki Plaza and thus the murder of Saburo, with the goal of Yorinobu being to tear down the Arasaka corporation that his father had built up. Once he had now inherited the corporation, he could now do everything from within to lower its stocks and destroy it once and for all, surprising a lot of people who thought he would just bring about a new age of Arasaka rule, one that was far more brutal. However, with V deciding not to head into the Arasaka HQ to deal with their engram within Mikoshi within the basement of the building, Yorinobu was never really threatened or forced to fight back against V's plan of destroying his forces. Hanako's plan to utilize the engram V had been unexpectedly testing for them would also not go ahead, meaning she had no way of being able to get her father's engram into her brother to bring about stability to her father's corporation. With no plans of taking out Yorinobu once and for all on V and Johnny Silverhand's behalf, Yorinobu could continue to tear down the corporation from within to make sure his father's legacy did not stand. However, as the years passed on into 2079, it is rumored that one of two things happened. The first would be that Yorinobu would himself step down from the corporation to move on to other things, taking with him all of Arasaka's Night City resources, shutting down their whole waterfront and removing the headquarter building. However, according to the author of his autobiography, he would believe that Yorinobu was finally taken out by the Arasaka board, who grew extremely unhappy by what he had done to the corporation, ruining its public image and destroying its stocks. Either one could be true, but in the end it was made quite clear that Arasaka in the year of 2079 did not have a presence within Night City anymore, and Yorinobu's plan, and actually Johnny Silverhand's plan of destroying them from the inside, was a success. They had lost their superpower status and were once again, like after the corporate war, forced out of the city and most likely moved back to Japan to try and recuperate their losses and reform the corporate's board to build up their stocks once again. For Night City, this was bad news. Since the unification war had ended, Arasaka was one of their largest investors and also had been the one defending them from NUSA and Militech rule. With them now out of the picture, their largest corporate investor was now gone, and the floodgates were now open for many different corporations to charge into the city and set themselves up in the center and pump millions of eddies into the city, including Arasaka's biggest rival, Militech. With their largest competitor now out of the picture, as well as the fact that Dogtown had been put in its place thanks to V's actions saving the president and taking out Kurt Hansen, Militech had become stronger than ever. Their weapon sales were up massively, and their technology branch was bringing out some of the latest and greatest things for public purchase and private use, which by 2079 would include a new software that was used to create more safety measures to combat enemy netrunners, which worked at allowing users to have an increase of 200% minimum safety from any attacks. Due to these increases in technology and sales, Militech became even larger in their stocks and presence over the whole of North America. On top of that, they would continue to supply the NUSA with whatever they needed for their overall goals, which at this point in time in 2079 was looking more and more likely to be taking Night City for themselves. That said, Night City's problems were getting worse, especially on the crime front, with gangs and cyber psychos even more than before. Seeing this, Militech would quickly realize that MaxTac were failing in what was their one and only job, and with that, started looking into taking things into their own hands, creating a new project that was to develop their own special soldiers that would tackle the cyber psychos. For Night City, they needed all the help they could get, and finally, President Myers' plan of taking Night City was happening, as they sent their full Militech force into the city to fight crime and form together with the NCPD to bring about a new era of order for the people of Night City. That said, when Militech did move in, Night City and the rest of North America started noticing something very odd. The mass community of homeless that were around the streets of Night City was suddenly disappearing without a trace, with the Night City Inquirer asking, did they all suddenly find homes? Where have they all suddenly gone? When clicking on the link, however, the article would suddenly become blocked by the ever-present Netwatch, who had also grown throughout the years, becoming far more forceful, shutting down websites such as the activist blog known as the Bartmoss Collective, whose sole goal was to speak out against corporations. One theory that could be possible would be linked to Militech's new Cyber Psycho combat squad they were making. With Militech present within Night City and the homeless getting fewer by the day, it could either mean two things once again. Either Militech are cleaning the streets of them by killing them and getting rid of their remains to make Night City look much nicer, or they are being taken away and being put through tons of tests in secret facilities to be turned into the next form of MaxTac, funded solely by the mega corporation. Either way, it's extremely mysterious that Militech's presence has come at the cost of the unfortunate and impoverished communities in the city. Regardless of where the homeless were, Militech were here to stay, setting up massive blockades throughout the city, policing what would seem to be a very big area within the center of the city, also setting up massive propaganda campaign posters seeking people to join up into the Militech forces for the new 2080s decade. Maybe Militech's increase in power was due to the NUSA housing the famous netrunner of Songbird or Somi once again, and maybe had turned her into an even more dangerous superweapon, forcing all those who weren't under NUSA rule to think again, which could explain why Arasaka pulled out of Night City and why Militech were allowed to move in, especially after Night City were so anti-Militech for years. That's just a theory, however, but in the year of 2079, it is unknown where Songbird is or what the NUSA have done with her since the events within Dogtown. One other major corporation rose to prominence during this year, one that would go on to surprise many, that being Zetatech. Zetatech hadn't really been a major player in recent years. The last time anyone had really heard much about their corporation was back during the first corporate war between EBM and Orbital Air, in which Zetatech's branch would be completely wiped out in data attacks. For a time they just continued to do business but on a smaller scale, really not appearing at all in Night City. However, their focus on cyberware development got larger in the late 2070s, and with a major gap in the market forming from Arasaka losing a lot of their influence, Zetatech were able to up their operations and gain a lot of loyal customers, with it being said that 83% of people of North America housed Zetatech products. Zetatech provided some state-of-the-art cyberware, including their latest range, which was said to stop all forms of cyber psychosis when it integrated with the person's nervous system. And in an era where this was a major problem, this was a huge selling point and helped them really increase their profits and allow them to become a household name. By 2078, Zetatech started to wheel out new revolutionary products such as the ImmunoAid Plus, which boosted the human immune system to prevent cyber psychosis, a SAMP 4.0 combat drone, and a prototype Chariot AV that was state-of-the-art with a unique sleek design that was to be officially released in 2080. But it was their transportation system that was the big selling point for the corporation that everyone knew them for, with their AVs being the main ones used within Night City, with even corporations such as Trauma Team using them on their day-to-day operations. Now becoming a major player in the corporate scene after years of being pretty silent, Zetatech moved into Night City, setting up their main headquarters being located on Berkeley Avenue and two other offices within Westbrook and Watson, as well as buying up multiple independent Ripperdocs and setting them up as their own cyberware stores. Not many really understood how Zetatech got so big so suddenly, even with their products being widely popular. However, once again, another rumor states that Zetatech signed a secret deal with the Night City government, and that helped them to spread throughout the city. This deal has been shown through the fact that even the NCPD's vehicles have been massively upgraded and drones fly throughout the city, being most likely supplied by this quickly growing corporation. The fact that Zetatech's cyberware stores are setting up everywhere could also once again link closely to Militech's goals of setting up a new soldier force to combat cyber psychos. And with Zetatech's cyberware being heavily resistant to cyber psychosis, what better way of getting Night City's own people as being the test subjects or combatants against these dangerous individuals plaguing the city? Throughout the rest of Night City, things weren't much better. The FIA was still up to no good within 2079, as a spy was found within their ranks and exposed to everyone by Night Corp themselves, showing that despite Militech involvement within the city now, the Night City government, which was headed by Mayor Jefferson Perez since 2077, was against NUSA involvement in their Night Corp operations and wanted to shut them down at all costs. That, or they just didn't like being spied on by Myers. Zetatech's security forces also seemed to find themselves at war with Petrochem, most likely over precious resources like Chu-2, but it is unknown what kicked off that battle or who is winning it. But for the poor corporate rippers owned by the corporation, they are having to patch up the security forces on a regular basis due to these conflicts. Biotechnica was still up to no good as well, as they would go on to create deadly mutated strains of a bacteria in their labs that would infect all of the residents of Wellsprings, causing wide cases of fevers, seizures, horrible diarrhea, and other horrific symptoms. And as of this point in 2079, 10 deaths have been recorded due to this, and there might be even more that were unrecorded and swept under the rug. That wasn't the last of the people's troubles either, as on the 16th of December 2078, Night Corporation bought up all of the marketplaces within Watson to turn them into new areas for the new corporations coming in, setting up tons of construction sites. This led to yet more homelessness and anger, and suddenly a real sense of anti-corporate feeling spread throughout the community, looking to hit back at the ones who drove their businesses away. To combat this ideology, Night Corp issued leaflets stating that it was now a crime to be within these construction areas, and new laws were being put into place around the remaining marketplaces. Essentially, residents will be prosecuted and tried for major crimes if they loitered within the marketplace without permission, tried to continue their business that had been shut down due to the construction, verbally or physically attacked a Night Corp staff member within said marketplace, extorted compensation for the stalls lost in the deal, and just generally getting in the way of Night Corp's operations. This left the people of Night City feeling like they were now even more controlled by the corporations and their lives were getting worse, not even being allowed to make money on their once harmless food or goods stalls. For some individuals, however, life was indeed better within 2079. For Judy Alvarez, for example, after the events within Night City, losing Evelyn Parker and working with V on a dual-link BD experience, she would leave for the wider world to see all North America had to offer, first taken to Seattle, but eventually reaching Pittsburgh, which had changed a lot since the early years of the 2000s, where it was known as the combat zone of the pit. Here she would go on to meet her new love of her life, Bianca, and would settle down within the city, ready to move on from what had happened to her in Night City, and constructed a new chapter for her to live. The same was happening for Kerry Eurodyne, who was massively struggling in life ever since Johnny Silverhand had died back in 2023. Finally coming to his senses within 2077 thanks to V and Johnny's engram, Kerry got back into making music and setting up his solo career, recording new songs and going on tour all over Europe. After his sold-out European tour ended at the end of 2078, Kerry would start making his new album with the record label of MSM, due to be released at some point in 2079, and with it went on a world tour and a low orbit one as well, taken to the incredible space station known as the Crystal Palace to play the biggest gig of his career. In an interview with WNS, Kerry would go on to quote, "I feel like I've been reincarnated into third life. It's preem. I'm digging it." Also stating in another interview that this was him fulfilling his dreams by saying, "You're gonna try telling me that a multi-milli-euro contract on a space station is proof I've finally gone off the deep end. Wrong. That happened years ago. This is me turning my dreams into reality." Clearly going to show that whilst Kerry has had his rough years after the split of Samurai, he is finally bouncing back and trying to prove everyone who doubts him wrong, as he would prove in another quote stating, "Lots of people at different times announced the end of my career. I guess it's nice I get to mark the end of each new era. Every time they prophesize my doom, and every time they shout Alleluia when they're wrong." For others, life wasn't so great this year. For Panam Palmer, her nomad group continued their plan to find new land, to seek out new work and keep the family safe, now in the possession of their stolen Militech Basilisk tank. Panam and Sol would still go on to be the joint leaders of the family and would venture outside of Night City for good. Where they headed, however, is completely unknown, but hopefully they would go on to find that perfect place to set up where they could continue to build up their new lives, cutting ties with all they knew from the Neon City. River Ward, the once honourable NCPD detective, would be majorly conflicted in his life. After solving an incredibly complex and personal case involving his nephew Randy Kutcher, River would see that the rehabilitation costs for Randy were astronomically high, higher than he could afford on his wages. Despite being praised for what he had done, River had to find a new way to find the funds, and after months of trying to find them in an honest way, he realised he had to go another direction, going full on corrupt and selling secret NCP data to Trauma Team to get the right funds to save Randy. This cost River everything in terms of his career, and because of it, within this year, was filled with self-destructive guilt, wanting to cut all ties from everyone he was once close to and worked with. After doing this deal with Trauma Team, River would also become a wanted man and would live a life running from his once colleagues. Going from an honest, friendly cop, River had opened a new chapter of his life, one that had lost him everything, but at the same time had saved his nephew at least. Similarly, Solomon Reed was also filled with tons of guilt due to his actions within Dogtown in 2077. Feeling like he was responsible for Somi's fate, whatever that be now, Reed decided it was time to hang up his fieldwork shoes and retire back to the desk work for the FIA. Overwhelmed by what had happened, the idea of Somi being disappointed in him or being abused by scientists of the NUSA ate at him on a daily basis, and every day at his desk, he would ask one simple question to himself, that being, could I have done things differently? But every time he asked that question, he knew that even if he could, it was too late, and it was best not to dwell on past events. For Victor Vector, the popular everyday Ripper Doc, life would change quite a bit for him since 2077. For years, Victor had faced corporations trying to buy him out of his popular business with Biotechnica, sending him regular emails wanting him to join their amazing eco-friendly corporation, but Victor always said no, wanting to make sure his business was personal and his clients were people he wanted to have around him. But as the years went on, the rent was getting higher and the corporations were getting more and more aggressive with their talks with Victor. Misty, whose shop was connected to Victor's clinic, stood strong, turning down every corporation that came through the door, not flinching at all to their threats. But Victor became weak and eventually folded to them, selling away his clinic to the fast-growing Zetatech, and with it signed away Misty's life as well. Misty, mad with rage that Victor gave in to the corpo's threats, started gathering her things, trying to work out what to do next in her life, seeing Victor less and less. Victor continued to run his business, now under the watchful eye of Zetatech, but because of it, lost all of his past clients who were passionate about the anti-corp ideology. Eventually, as Victor carried on, Misty would reach a low point, witnessing her favorite herbal store burn down in the ongoing riots, and realized then and there it was time for a big change. It was time for Misty to leave behind everything she once knew and say goodbye to Night City. Upon leaving the city once and for all, Misty would bump into the worst affected individual of all of them, that being V. Thanks to the operation done by the NUSA's elite doctors over in Langley, V had survived Johnny Silverhand's engram, but this came with a major consequence. V's nervous system was completely fried and had become numb to any cybernetic implants being put into their body. If they did try and get combat cybernetics put into them to continue their merc lifestyle once again, they would immediately die due to the process. Everything they had worked up to, the career they had built up, could not be continued. They were just a regular human with ordinary human features once again, and Night City's endless violence would become too dangerous for them to travel to. Not only that, but as they had been in a coma for 2 years, all their contacts were gone. They had moved on with their lives and cut ties with V, believing they were dead whilst out on a gig or killed by the engram. Their home was also taken back by the Mega Block company thanks to V not being able to pay their rent, and all of their possessions, including their wide collection of weapons, was taken as well to pay off all of the missed payments. Meeting with Misty, she would go on to convince V that this was their opportunity to live a new life, to come up with something completely different. With the world believing that they were dead, they could have a fresh start with whatever they wanted. Misty, for example, was to venture out into an ancient forest within Poland to get away from the chaos of Night City. For V, the world was now their oyster, and they could do anything they wanted, which included being a fixer or even working closely with Reed back at Langley. That said, news reached Rogue within the afterlife, who stated clearly to V that they had now become legend throughout the city, with many wanting a drink named after them. But if V were to linger within Night City and visit the bar on a regular basis, that legend status would lose all of its meaning, and V would go back to just being a regular nobody in the eyes of the Edgerunner community. The best thing for V was to follow in Misty's footsteps, look out into the wider world, and embrace the life they had been given back after months of trying to find that cure. Overall, whilst the city looked relatively the same and some would argue had become worse, V definitely was the main one who had lost everything, yet at the same time, most importantly, got a chance to make a new name for themselves whilst also being considered, along with Johnny Silverhand and Jackie Wells, as legends of Night City, the thing they wanted to be at the start of this long journey. An ending that perfectly encapsulates the meaning of the tarot card known as the Tower, which in the standard tarot deck follows the Devil card, associated with danger, crisis, sudden change, destruction, higher learning and liberation, and potentially destructive change, which is exactly what the world of Night City is going through in 2079, and the same with V and Misty's lives. In the end though, will anything really change like the card states, or is this Neon City stuck in a loop that never ends, with corporations coming and going and the everyday people being just at the bottom of the barrel, struggling to survive day in, day out? Or is 2079 the start of everything going into a positive light, where corporations fall to the everyday person, opportunities arise for people to jump on, and a world where gang violence and crime is now gone? Ultimately, that will have to be a story for another time. But with that said, this has been the tale of the Tower, the start of a new chapter. This has been an insight into what the world of Night City will look like in the year of 2079, thanks to V's actions in 2077. I want to say a big thank you for watching this video. Do let me know what theories you have for Cyberpunk 2 or what is going on generally within the 2079 Night City in the comments below. I also want to say a massive thank you to my patrons who allow me to make them on a regular basis, including my small fishes, my big fishes Greg and Anthony, my YouTube channel Wise Ones, Sith Lord 906, Video Gamer 75 and Havig, my sharks Jason X117 and Wow Such Gaming, and my megalodons Sinus, Hazy Thoughts and Bad Clams 83. But that is all for now. Thank you for watching again. If you want to support the channel, all the links are down below. Please give it a like, a comment, do whatever you need to do. Check it out on Spotify, all that stuff. And with all of that said, I shall see you all in the next one. Cheers.